Esteemed colleagues, good evening. Please make yourselves comfortable. I would like to provide some more time for the latecomers, but the session only lasts 1 hour and 15 minutes. We're limited in time, so we would like to listen to our esteemed panelists and to discuss the issues of microfinancing on the one hand and innovation and digitalization, AI, and using all that in scoring and a lot of other issues. I would like to introduce my colleagues, and you know they are all very respected people. I would say a couple of words about them, and they have something in common. I will start with Alexei Besenko, who is Chief Executive Officer, Simple Finance. It seems to me that Alexei will be very useful for us when we talk about a digital ecosystem for financing SMEs, because other colleagues specialize in other segments. So we'll hear a lot of interesting things from Alexei. Andre Asteta, Chief Executive Officer of Vexcash AG, German company for finance group. He will be talking, he will be comparing Russian experience and international trends. We would like to hear his opinion about remote identification. It's an important issue for Russia, and we've all attended the plenary meeting today, which touched upon those issues. We talked about transferring information from databases when channels work with great difficulty. Our next colleague is Boris Batin, co-founder and chief executive officer, ID Finance Holding, Tech Holding. Boris will be one of those who will start our discussion about how a very serious fintech holding grew from a small startup and actually expanded its boundaries, has become an international holding, and he will share the innovative approaches that were used by his colleagues. Ivan Merinov, Chief Executive Officer, SMS Finance Group. It's important to note, well, I've already mentioned remote identification. I think Ivan will shed some light on this, how biometric data, how DNA is used, and what remote identification means and how to cope with it. Sergey Vesovchuk, Chief Risk Officer, Equanta Group. He will also mention scoring and artificial intellect, and I think he will disclose some secrets. And the last but not the least, Sergey Sedov, director and founder, Robot Zymer online loan system. Sergey, I hope, will also share his vision of innovation and artificial intelligence. My name is Vladimir Chistuchin. I'm Deputy Governor Bank of Russia. I'm in charge of microfinancing, and I want the panelists to talk about microfinancing as a start of the and you know that Finapolis was thought of, you know, that banks transform into IT companies and IT companies become banks, and so I would like to talk not only about banks, but we need to mention that fintech means other segments of financial market, maybe microfinancing, and because of their small size, those participants are more agile, more innovative, and they can faster perceive new tendencies and implement new things. I hope we will be talking about scaling, and because you need to make a lot of investment to develop fintech, and that's a myth. And another myth is that that only works with huge audiences when you have a huge amount of data. And the colleagues will probably speak about that and how it develops. It's obvious for me that the microfinancing sector has been growing very fast during the recent years. It's much ahead in the rate of growth of the banking sector, and I don't want this to be the story of marginal borrowers who cannot get credits from classical banking institutions. I want to talk of success stories related to the fact that customized services are offered, that the microfinancing organizations choose their clients because it's fast and convenient. And I'm certain colleagues will be talking about this. Within the framework of this panel, we will try to talk of 4 subjects. The first one is scoring, approaches to scoring in microfinancing. Second, identification of borrowers. This is a serious subject, which is much talked about. This is the access to databases and remote identification and other issues. I'm certain the colleagues will speak about that. Then the platform solutions. We know that the story of the first 6 years of this year is the story of market play, because the landscape of the financial market is changing. Platforms are introduced either at a stage, or players create their own marketplaces, and we need to understand how that relates to SMEs financing and microfinancing. And the fourth subject is application of innovation in other spheres by microfinancing organization, and how that can be replicated to other segments of the financial market. We will speak about international experience, so I would like to Andrei to carefully follow our discussion and to be able to answer some questions. So let's start with scoring. So would like to ask Sergey Visovchuk. We know that your organization uses advanced scoring systems. You use huge amount of parameters, about 10,000 parameters or something like that. And certainly you are trying to take account of the client's emotions, how loud they speak, and then you decide whether the client is ready to borrow and then to return the loan. I would like to hear in more detail about your scoring model and what is so innovative in it. Thank you, Vladimir, and for the trust, for entrusting me with the start of the discussion. I would like to provide some context to the colleagues. 5 years ago, most of major credit organizations, used kind of a manual approach to decision-making, and during the last 5 years that started to change, and as of now, most of the decisions are made automatically, and it takes the leaders of the market about 1 minute to approve a loan. That is especially vivid in PDLs. So the client wants to solve a financial problem urgently, and unless he's given an answer in 1 minute, he can go to another organization and 15 minutes later to get a loan faster. So fast approval of loans is a huge advantage to the leaders of the market.
In our scoring model, use the data from questionnaires, the data about SMEs, and we also use a lot of alternative data, telecom data, for example, geolocations, the payments that a client has made, how the client is using the roaming, and also we are using personalized data that we receive from different messages that are sent by customers via their phones. Also, we have a look at social networks, so it's a different volume of data. I'd like to note the following. Unlike the banks, we focus more on alternative data because the majority of our customers, they do not have their credit histories, and they have problems in showing and demonstrating their revenues. And we also have a look at how they fill in questionnaires and analyze it, and the banks are using similar technologies. They use that in order to analyze the client's profile when the customers come to them for a second time, and then they analyze it. And when we get primary requests from clients, it's a different story. And I'd like to touch upon the following that you have mentioned, the emotions of the clients. At the second plenary session, the representative of the central bank mentioned that they launched a pilot project, but then the discussion did not move on, but we did implement it in reality. How have we achieved it? So we developed our project, our pilot project, in the following way. We had a look at different communication, interaction points of our clients and our employees, and they are using a certain scoring model, and then they were taking certain requirements, whether the clients complies with it or not. And there were two answers that you can judge by a client's customer's face. But when we had a fair experiments, we took the picture, the photo, and asked who would pay out a loan. And of course, the photograph was not a clear indication. But the second aspect is the behavior of a client. A lot depends on his or her behavior. All our dialogues with clients are recorded. We have the transcripts of them, and then we analyzed this data. And at each point of time, we understood the volume, how loud they talked, what was their dynamic of it. And then we started using this data in different ways. Just to give you a simple example, simple case. If a customer is pronouncing some swear words, then the probability that he would not pay out his loan is quite high. And if a client is asking a lot of questions, is comparing different offers, then it is obvious that clients are choosing the most appropriate conditions and terms. And then it means that a client would quite probably pay out a loan. And these technologies, they improve scoring, and they improve our overall customer-oriented approach. And getting back to the main topics of our discussions, I'd like to say that when we have the IoT, when we have the data not only about our dialogues, but data about how a client is talking to his smart car or to his smart home, this is kind of science fiction, but that is the thing of the future. Sergey, the system of scoring that you are describing, that what has been mentioned about machine learning, about artificial intelligence, is it self-educated system, or how does that work? Well, it is 50-50. Our current models are changed independently. So it's a self-educated system. But of course, to conduct some new survey, you need manual resources and manual labor. Thank you. Thank you. A very interesting story about scoring. When we launched Robot Zymer in Russia, we did that in 2014, we paid attention to the underwriters' use in this process, and the speed is a key thing. I totally agree with you in that. What parameters in terms of the speed? I had 1 minute, or what do you have there? We measure that less than 10 seconds, but it's not about the exact figure. What are you analyzing? Yes. What we analyze and whether we send a request to the solution module, we are calculating that, if we speak tentatively. Well, I just mentioned the approximate number. You will frighten off other people. Thank you for the comments. I have a question to Boris Batin. When I got familiar with the scoring system they're using, it's not about the name of it, but about the discount, because people do like discounts. Really, I don't want to get a fair price, but I do want to get a discount. The propensity scoring, it is called. So it provides discounts based on personal characteristics and personal features of a client. Could you please elaborate on that? Yes, of course. In reality, and colleagues are talking about scoring, the audience expects to hear information about the solvency, whether a person would pay out a loan or not. If he is a financially illiterate person, he would pay out. Or if he uses swear words, he would not do that. But the scoring is the evaluation of the probability. And in our organization, we are doing exactly this. We are evaluating and assessing the probability. And we have different departments that are using this data for their specific areas, sectors. For data scientists, like 20 people, they are building the models, evaluating probability. We have risk management department in order to evaluate the solvency. Then we have a team of marketing specialists, and they use this data in order to increase the so-called client retention, so that they come back for these services and provide the customized products. And that's also about scoring. And the same applies to the evaluation of solvency. We have specific factors, specific features of behavior. And the same applies to how he behaves when he buys something. And there are factors that influence on the probability, and that depends on some personal traits. And there is a huge category of people who like discounts. So no matter what is the price, they want to get the discount. And if you increase the price 2 times and then provide a discount of 15%, it will sound like a very interesting proposal for this person, and he would prefer to get that. But there are people who focus more on some emotional aspects. For example, a person would like to buy that today, and I'm not ready to wait for a week when the price is reduced. I want it right now. And our team is analyzing this customer behavior. We are calling that propensity scoring. The probability of using our service, and depends on the basis of that, we are offering them certain services. For example, during the vacation period, we offer them some special offers for holidays, for air tickets, and it doesn't depend on the amount of discount, 10%, 15%. It's very important to demonstrate the discount and that it exists. For some people, the final price is of paramount importance. Some people are ready to buy certain service at a certain price. So our system is constantly evaluating this, and then it sets certain triggers during their communication with the clients. And we see the effect of propensity scoring in offering certain specific product that can be interesting for a client. And then the average profitability of portfolio is growing. And at certain point of time, it is even more important than additional data for scoring. And then the evaluation of scoring is quite good, and additional data is providing us only a small positive feedback. But as for evaluating behavior, there is a lot to be studied about this aspect. And this sector has given us a larger positive effect than other aspects. So summing up all of this, I think that many organizations will be using scoring in all the spheres, in evaluating solvency, in planning the sales, in cross-sales of other products. Propensity scoring, offering individual discounts have helped us a lot in increasing profitability. I have two questions to you based on what you have mentioned. The first one is, you mentioned the probability. So you have the mathematic model, I suppose. And the mathematic model means that you take statistic data from some source. So it should be a valid, trustworthy data. How do you manage that? I would like to understand it. Because the major problem that some companies are facing, it's very difficult for them to obtain this data. And the topic number two, I know that you and group of companies are operating in different countries. When you are using your scoring model, propensity scoring, do you use that in all countries? Of course, you are fine-tuning and adjusting that in some countries, or there are some significant changes in specific countries. Well, first of all, you are right. Well, the absence of data is a large problem. Serious problem in evaluating the solvency, for example. And when we did that for the first time, we just supposed it manually, took the database and adjusted this model, and then used it, and then machine learning and artificial intelligence enriched our data. The more data, the more information we have, the more accurate model we get. The most important thing is to start the process, and the next country starts with a better level, not from scratch. It's not about institution, but we learn lessons from other experiences in other countries, and we use that in the models that are much better in each country. But of course, you have to spend some time on working with data in every country. And we see that in scoring, and when we launch our business in other countries, it gets better, it gets easier, and it is faster because we have our previous experience in other countries. Yes, thank you. Dear colleagues, if we sum up our discussion about scoring, we can draw certain conclusions. I support you in that the speed is very important, but the quality is also quite critical. It's not only about taking out loans, but also about getting the payback from it. And it's all about mathematical model, but also about the fact that the models are hybrid, and we have a very wide range of parameters that have to be taken into consideration. It's also about taking into account individual characteristics. I like the example of photo. It's about Mr. Lombroso's theory about the skull, the form of the skull, the shape of the skull that can tell you whether a person is a criminal or not. So if you use a swear word and if you get drunk, then then your behavior is changed. That it can affect how you will repay a loan. It's about cultural behavior, of course. You have to be sober here. I'd like to add an interesting feature, an interesting observation of working in this sector. I have been working there for many years. These innovations come to us from young companies because it is easier for them to believe in a certain concept, new concept, and they launch initiatives very fast, and then it is replicated in the whole sector. The same applies to scoring, to propensity scoring, and to some other innovations and novelties in the companies. And it's very important to follow new startups, new companies that are launching new things on the market, because then it will be disseminated and it can be scaled up. I believe that banks are also doing that, not only giant, large companies. Of course, it is easier to launch a project from scratch, but the topic of scoring is interrelated with identification. The requirements for identifications are internal requirements of the companies and legislative requirements as well. Mr. Ivan Marinov, I'd like to ask you a question. We know that you are improving identification process by using biometric DNA data. So at what stage are you right now? And what do you think, how can that help us to improve the quality of identification? Because I'm not a professional. It seems to me that DNA can give you a 100% probability. If you have this biometric data or DNA, it can help you a lot.
Thank you, Vladimir. Well, I don't think that anyone will ready to provide their DNA for 15,000 rubles or for a transaction. Well, people even sell their kidneys. But the problem of identification is that, as different from banks, we don't see our clients. And the number of clients is growing all the time. And I was talking to a colleague, and he told me that small credit organizations started to sell their clients with the pictures from their passport. And very soon, the companies that identify the clients by their pictures, by their photographs, can expect the fraud to go up. And our initial task during the identification is to prove that the client is really the person, that the application was not filled out by somebody else, but the task is to correctly identify the client. And biometrical parameters may be of use, not only in the general sense like the picture or the iris or the shape of ears, but some more exotic things, like the veins on the hand. Well, we all pass through accreditation and identification of at the forum, so they make a infrared picture and they define the image of veins, which is unique for any person. and comparing that information with a certain database. And that's one of the biggest challenges and problems from the biometric point of view. So comparing that with the information that the client provided, you can, with a certain accuracy, say that the client is really the person that pretends to be the client, and any system can be actually broken into, and if it's DNA, there will be people who will find a DNA copy, and it's like always, the technologies improve, but the hackers also improve, and biometric information is so expensive to forfeit that we can play in this field. We know how to do it. I mean the microfinance organization, because banks still see the client when the client physically comes to their office. They don't need that. So for us, this is a gold mine, with one small exception. You need to understand who has the right to use this system. So you've downloaded your biometric data. Let it be DNA analysis. It went to the internet. So who does it belong to? Does it belong to you, or does it belong to Ross Technologies? And if that belongs to Ross Technologies, how will they use it? Will it be used on your behalf, or it will be used against you, so that nobody ever gets or a storm system? They will certainly use it, whether you like it or not. Therefore, the state monopoly in this area, in the area of collecting biometric data, is the biggest challenge, although this is a very promising system, in particular for us. So coming back to the accuracy of identification, yes, there are methods that allow to provide a very high accuracy of identification. If you use fitness trackers, for instance, so you use a flash light, you put your finger against it, and you get enough information. So if that's not in the far future, that is something that is being used right now. And if Apple ID or Face ID or Samsung is easy to deceive, for instance, putting a mask on your face, but more advanced system, a system of veins identification, is very difficult to deceive. But it's the issue of price. As soon as a system is set up, a full-fledged system, or it will be hacked. If that biometric system, and the question is how much you trust this system. Like Oleg Tinkov said, well, you've given your data to someone, and you can be sure that it will be known to everyone. So it's a sword and shield story. And Sergei Sedov wanted to say a couple of words, I think. Yes, that's a very interesting topic and a very important topic, the identification of borrower, so that we don't attribute the credit to another person. But these biometric technologies are in the future. They're not in the present. I think it will be very useful to us, the online companies, to make the so-called through identification, so that we asked the bank whether the card number and that does it correspond to the card holder. So that can be done through the fast payment system, which is being introduced by the Bank of Russia. So can you ask whether those veins correspond to the number of the card, and you get the answer. But I don't think that's in the nearest future. I think that will be not implemented tomorrow. Sergey, certainly, I think it's unlikely that this will be implemented in the nearest future. But Boris Batin, I wanted him to say a couple of words about this, and I believe that in the contents of identification, he has to say something, the anti-fraud system and so on, if possible. Just add a few words. But I think you should split it into two parts. From the standpoint of law, there are actions that are mandatory for the company. And from the standpoint of risks, and fraud and anti-fraud brings us back to probability assessment. So you need to reduce the probability that the person on the other side of the computer is the wrong guy. And you should do that constantly, continuously. So it's continuous verification. You cannot stop this process. The system must continuously check the client's handwriting, how he fills in the questionnaire, and so on and so forth. Because people are ingenious enough, and they find ways to deceive our protection. But if you do that continuously without stop, from A to Z, throughout the client's life, that becomes much more difficult. So when the probabilities multiply, the probability of deceiving the system goes down very seriously. So if there's 50% probability you can deceive the system, but if there's 10 iterations like that, the probability of fraud is negligible. So we take this approach. We're not looking for a single solution that will cut off all the fraudulent people. We set tens of barriers that will very likely cut off those crooks, and the probability of fraud by the end is negligible. This is our approach. Well, and what Ivan said about the system being expensive, well, a lot of small, simple steps are much cheaper than building one barrier that is difficult to overcome. Yes, I agree. And that's true. Because actually the handwriting is typical. Suppose a client takes 5 loans in Moscow, and the next loan is from Magadan, from a different IP and from a different telephone. That's certainly a fraud. But then you have to do the reverse. How the data of that Moscow client got to that person in Vladivostok. But that's the next step. And that's something that is our strength. We know how to see the peaks, how to find those cases, and we could help banks tell about their vulnerabilities. So you don't believe that a person from Moscow may move to Magadan or to Vladivostok for a few years. But like Boris said, several events must take place. Suppose there is a different identification of the telephone, a different SIM card life cycle, the geolocation changed. There's quite a lot of stop factors that can be used. Well, I'm convinced you cannot be deceived. I agree. Andrei. If possible, from the standpoint of identification, that's a global history. In all countries, in all systems, they try to provide identification on the one hand, to store the data and to make it convenient for the client. After listening to all this discussion, can you say, from your standpoint, where the international experience, what is the international experience, and what is the most important? Do our foreign colleagues speak the same language with us, or maybe they are solving some other problems?
Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure. And yeah, to answer your question, I mean, I heard a lot about technologies. I heard a lot about turning data into information to make sure that we don't have fraud. So what I can say is, from my experience, is that I can take this off for a couple of minutes. We are seeing a trend right now. We search for the perfect model, But let me give you an example right now what I'm experiencing in Germany. So we have, for example, a company that is specialized in identification, identifies the customer through the customer journey. But what do they do now? They start with the concept of licensing this identification to companies that they work with. So basically, I think we're still far away from having the perfect model to prevent fraud. And I was pretty much surprised, and I'm meeting them in 2 weeks, what they're doing with this, because I'm now, just to give you a practical example, I'm now expanding in a small niche. It's an 8 billion market in Germany, so a small niche in dental repair, where we're offering some services, and we think about to outsource the web identification to some people that we just license in 1 or 2 days. So basically, to be able to do that, you need to have the right data set behind to turn it into an information to give the credit, to make sure that the money comes back. So basically, this is one of the trends that I see. And yeah, basically, it's all about the model. I think we're all having the same challenge. And the model then decides what we're doing in the future. And if the money comes back where it belongs to the company that gives it.
I think that's a very important aspect, and that's outsourcing. And that's not internal development in a bank or in a microfinancing organization, but that's looking for specialized companies that dedicate all of their lives to understanding who the client is, their identification, and building their profiles. Can somebody comment on that? Why are we doing that in-house? And what precludes us from outsourcing this? Or such companies are absent in Russia, or it's cheaper for us to do it ourselves? Well, that's an interesting example. And I believe that that's a good decision as the next step in the market. If we are talking about scoring, the United States have accepted FICO score as one standard, and if that's 600, they really believe it. We don't have anything similar in Russia. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough expertise, and too little time has passed for such a service to appear. So every company does that in-house, just like well, identification bureaus. Previously, each bank had its own credit bureaus, but then separate companies appear that analyzes that data, and that becomes a market standard. The same with identification. We are making the first steps only, and I believe that in 5 to 10 years, there will be 1 or 2 companies that will be doing it better than each individual financial organization, and they will be servicing the whole market, like in state-provided services. This is one of the benchmarks for identification. So if if you identified your personality in a state system, you can say that you're identified. Early in the 2000s, when we introduced laws countering money laundering, I was on a business trip in the United States, and it seemed that they had an advanced system, and we were in FinCEN organization that really fights money laundering in the United States. And they really talked about some stories. They said that we have companies that specialize in the principle know your client and sell those database to banks, brokers, and all those who need to identify a client. But the question they could not answer was, where did they get all the data about those clients? And I had a clear impression that it was semi-legal activity or quasi-legal activity when they collected data about their clients and used that data in all their models. We want to avoid this story because Ivan was right, because the subject of integrity of data is very important, and we don't want such quasi-legal businesses to get access to personal data. You remember that During the first panel discussion, we had that discussion when we talked about whether everyone should be opened or it is the client's decision whether to open their personal data or not. And those who protect it must protect it with maximum efficiency. I think that is similar. Okay, colleagues, let's proceed and let's talk about the platform solutions.
Probably we need to say here, and I'd like to reiterate that we have claimed the marketplace as a story for banks, for insurance companies, probably a story for brokers community, but we have not said a lot about marketplace, not as a vendor of products, but as a marketplace, as an end customer. And their development, their creation of platform solutions, their creation of ecosystem, I'd like Mr. Basenko to talk about that, and maybe after that we will start a discussion. Thank you. It's an interesting project by the Central Bank of Russia. When we heard about that for the first time, we thought about this service for SMEs, and we are lender of this segment, very interesting segment with a huge potential for growth. We developed a concept of marketplace for a client that combines a number of advantages. First of all, it's credit products, the loans for SMEs, and in the process of the credit analysis, irrespective of products, factoring, tender loans, we have standardized similar parameters, and it's not difficult to gather them and to customize it for a client. And this is a first aspect of marketplace, and we perform standardized analysis, and then the lender is using this data as he wishes to do that. In future, this system is joined with smart contracts and with the accounts of the clients, the transaction, no matter whether it is signed with a written contract or via the electronic signature, it is displayed on client's account. In other words, we are writing off certain amounts from a client's account for specific purposes. It's a secure technology, a very convenient one that is implemented in an easier way. It can be done by one click only. Today we are talking a lot about data, about how we can enrich that, how we can monetize the data, about the process of analysis, of how we are evaluating the solvency of clients, of SMEs. And I think that we can use this data in a wide range of sectors, and our marketplace is also about some services that are used on everyday basis, leasing, the logistics, and other areas. And in the process of analysis, we are understanding which services are used by a client, how much he's paying for that, and we can unite all these providers and vendors on the basis of this platform. It's not only about the generating clients, but it's also about the trust that the clients have in us, because they know that it's a convenient, it's a secure, safe system. They have a sort of a guarantee that they will get this payment, and if there is a delayed payment, then the trigger will demonstrate the percentage, and it will not be about the judicial proceedings that are necessary in some cases. So the system creates new additional opportunities for SMEs, for clients on everyday basis. And if we take the government contract, the state contract. We have been doing that a lot, and when we win the bidding, the tender for building a road, 1 kilometer of a road, we know all the terms and conditions for funding, for financing, and then we perform the loan analysis, the credit analysis for those lenders that would like to grant a loan to a specific customer. So these triggers demonstrate us all those aspects. And in general, it seems to me that SMEs and the services they're using, it's a next step in evolution, in standardizing the basic credit analysis, standardization of products. A good example is the bank guarantee warranty market. Currently, warranty up to 50 million. There are no banks that are doing all these operations manually. They're using aggregators. Standard Hub, that is the name of the service that we use in our company for these purposes. And PASI data is filled in the questionnaires. You upload the documents with the necessary descriptions, and that is how the interaction is done. It's very fast, it's very convenient, and the market is growing very fast with all those aggregators in place. So we think that that is a thing of the future. It will be the future of the loans of the SMEs with standardized products, with the possibility of having an access for clients to this wide range of services. Alexei, thank you very much. I'd like to express my viewpoint. So what you talked about is a very potentially good story. It's about the vertical penetration in all types of loans and credits. You've told us not only about the assessment, the evaluation of the client, what you are spending the money on, the analytics, the analysis. For me, marketplace is not only the vertical thing, but also a horizontal one. What do I mean by that? The SMEs have to take out a loan. In order to achieve that, they have to get a range of different companies. These are the options to get the money you need. And everybody understands that there is also the aspect of insurance, life insurance, other aspects of insurance that have to be taken into consideration. And here you have the set of insurance policies. Some free money that can be spent on buying some securities or maybe savings. And here is then access to a number of companies. So we get a wide range of all those options and companies. And what I wanted to end up with, this is the robot that provides you the consulting. So it advises you what to choose. So artificial intelligence is providing you recommendation, optimized options in terms of profitability. How far are we from this? Have you been thinking about it? Thank you, Vadim. Well, the list of services and useful things for SMEs is quite range, never-ending list, and standardization of analysis and the interface aspects and contracts is making possible to include any services. So any number of lenders can be included into this list. For example, the state support measures, that can be an example. Guarantee Foundation, for them we can perform their analysis as well for deposits, for stock exchange products, insurance products. Everything is based on data. So here we are getting back to the data, opening clients' data, enriching experience, getting better offers, better proposals, and then there is the struggle for a client. So it is a change of data for an access to a never-ending list of services. And talking about the stages, When will it be physically possible? We are here at the Forum of Innovative Technologies. Very often, the innovative technologies are a part of the puzzle of existing technologies, and the marketplace that I've talked about is a combination of already existing solutions. So we do not require any other inventions like inventing a bicycle. If we have legislation and other aspects in place, it can be an operating model. And it is already operating as it should be. Thank you, Alexei. I'm a little bit skeptical from the practical point of view. I liked your phrase about innovations that we are talking about. They are based on traditional technologies. And over the last years in the sphere of microfinance, I do not particularly believe in innovative financial companies, and I do not believe in them being able to do that. So we have our wishes, but there are some certain constraints and limitations. Of course, we see some success stories, and the colleagues have said that they're implementing some incredible things, but not all of them can be scaled up at the market. But it's all about the personnel, about the competences. So we have to bring all those aspects of the puzzles together. And I see how this story with the marketplace is emerging. But it's quite complicated. To bring all the aspects together is quite difficult. I'd like Sergei Sidov to talk about RoboCash platform. Because it's not a classical marketplace, but could you please provide your characteristics of RoboCash? How is this platform helping you to raise investment, to raise funds? Thank you. Well, in general, the funding problem is quite serious, and it's getting more serious with time. For example, in Russia, over the last 9 months, if we compare that with the last years, we have had 2 times more loans. In Kazakhstan and Philippines and other countries we are already operating, and the number of loans is growing significantly every month. And it shows us that reinvesting our own profit, we will not be able to satisfy the existing demand on the market. We have had a look at the possibilities on the market, and we saw some demand in Europe. The peer-to-peer investment, more than 100,000 private investors that know this sphere, and they are ready to undertake this risk. And we launched RoboCash platform in Latvia, and it is different from peer-to-peer invest model. It's not about investing into specific loan, but investing into a portfolio of loans. And when we launched this project, we saw that there are some competitive projects. At that time, there were 2 projects, similar projects on the market. And in order to differentiate us from competitors and provide an interesting offer for investors, we launched a fully robotized project because we like robots. And an investor, client in our project cannot choose which loan he's investing in, and we do not have a secondary market. And if a client needs an urgent liquidity, he cannot do that. But we got a very good positive feedback from clients because they choose their own parameters, and it is very fast, and all the other operations are performed by a robot. So it helps to save time on the one hand, and on the other hand, investors that have a lot of time on traditional platforms and they're choosing profitable loans manually, they get these additional advantages. We financed 50 million euros in loans. Kazakhstan and Spain are fully financed by this platform. Sergey, could you please tell us, usual question about surveillance? So if there are complaints on the part of the clients, whom they go to? Well, the regulation of peer-to-peer does not exist. But we have the regulation in Latvia, and the regulator suggested that we should define ourselves, define us as an entity. The clients are complaining to us in our support department, the maintenance support, and we have to resolve that. Once the client had to wait for 1 month, and the system lost the payment, and it took us 1 month to resolve that. But we have the guarantee for clients, and if we do not perform their obligations, within 30 days, we pay out this amount of investment plus percentage to the client to expand our horizons. Your colleagues in Latvia offered you which type of license? Well, they had 2 options, either a bank or a broker. Okay, it's very interesting. Andre, I'd like to ask you. Andre, in Germany, this classical marketplace that includes insurance, microfinance, banking activity, the broker's activity. Can we find this type of universal platform?
At the moment, no. Yeah. So basically, it's not there. We have a pretty shattered market. So we have a couple of brokers. We have some companies like Verivox that are comparison websites. We have some classical microfinance companies, but the microfinance companies in Germany are just starting. So basically, it's a market where we find out that the banks are not taking risks at all. So when you look at the balance sheets of the German banks, you see that a lot of customers are, to use that term, underbanked or just not taken care of. And this is something where we also shoot in. So we have a lot of customers that come to us, they're simply not served because they have no history. Then in Germany, when you talk to a bank, they say, no, you better don't touch this guy. Okay. So this is why it's still a strange market because we're in the beginning, but the surrounding countries are already much more advanced when it comes to microfinance. So we're at the beginning, we're at the start. This is why I'm happy to say that I work for a broker. I'm heading this one, and we're just setting up all the cooperations with banks. And just to build that bridge again, the perception from being scared of fintechs, being scared of microfinance companies totally changed in the last years. So I have a lot of friends that are in CEO positions in insurance companies and banks. So when I contacted them like 3 years ago when I said, you want to cooperate with an online company that gives loans, they said, oh, whoa, no. Now I say fintech, they say, oh yeah, let's talk. So this is a totally different environment at the moment. It is strange, so we do the same stuff, but they understood that we're building a bridge to them. So basically, we're serving them. We became a different channel to bring them the customer. Because let's be honest, I mean, I hope there are not too many bankers in the room. This is a microfinance and fintech room here. But when was the last time you spent more than 1 hour in a bank branch? So in my case, I was forced when I bought a house. So I needed to sit there and needed to drink that cappuccino. But I would prefer to do that online, honestly speaking. So that's why, yeah. And just to excuse myself, I was a banker for 20 years. I changed after a trip to Silicon Valley. That's when I joined fintech and microfinance. So just to be clear, I appreciate both sides. But the banks are becoming more and more open, the banks and insurance companies, to accept that they need to outsource some services, some channels to get to the customer, and that's basically it.
Andre, ну все-таки вот я...
Andre, yes, I understood that it is changing, but it is old school still. So you have to drive this process for German investors because you see that it is emerging so fast in Russia marketplace and other initiatives. So please do that. Join us in this direction. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Sergey Vesavchuk, let's forget about the international picture and let's talk about Russia. We talked about technologies in microfinance. So how what could you offer to other sectors, in particular to banks? Where do you see a competitive advantage, an advantage in terms of the products? What do you think about microfinance doing something for other sectors, including the banks? Well, I'm the risk director. It's all about scoring. It is different. We have quick, fast solutions. And currently, we are ready to do that. And we develop this solution that we are ready to offer. There is a demand for OMFO. And with banks, we have only a bank that is ready to launch a pilot project with us. And we can recall what Andreas said. Now, in Russia, we have the situation when you have you are representing microfinance organization, and banks are not ready to talk to you. But of course, it is changing. But so far, we are lagging behind. We have the technologies that we can share with you. But if we recall the image of MFO 3 to 5 years ago, the bankers perceived it and were not ready to talk to us.
So I hope that thanks to sessions like this one, this will be changed and this will make another step towards this process. I also wanted to make a parallel with identification. I join the opinion of my colleagues in that there's a lot of developments and most people are focusing on one kind of remote identification, but you must provide additional echelons, additional barriers. No system can cover all the possible risks. And MFOs, especially online MFOs, are pioneers in this area. They work through simplified identification and they issue online loans of up to 15,000 rubles to clients who have never come to their office. And they gain a huge, invaluable experience that will be demanded by the banks when the banks can deal with such clients. Sergey, Andrei also talked about the solution to the problem that you mentioned. Don't call yourself MFO, call yourself a fintech company, an IT company, and you'll get a good contact with the banks. A year ago, we rebranded. Now we are a Quanta group of companies, and everything went well. Yes. I have a question to Alexei Basenko. From your standpoint, you've spoken a lot about a marketplace for SMEs. How do you see the bank's role in this? Yes, of course. Part of the products are banking products. I mean, the billing and this will be also remain the classical credit organization function, and the bank can use their balance to involve a part of the clients for analysis, process analysis, and the verification and the electronic processing simplifies everything. So the bank needs to have a balance, a license, and products, and a will. And so there's a lot of possibilities remaining, and everyone will find their place in this market if they use these products efficiently. And the market is really big, and part of the clients, well, we compete only with banks, and part of the well, of course, the part of the checks, and certainly the big banks can offer conditions that we cannot offer. That's their marketplace, that their clients. And I asked it, well, probably there are no banks here. I hope that we are recording this discussion. Colleagues, and why are you sitting? You need to ask for business cards from all the panelists, including Andrei. Well, so you have solutions. You're not surprised. Okay. Bankers are ready to argue who is the big boss here, but so there's nothing that we did 100 years ago. Well, it's very important to exchange opinions. And closing this subject, I would ask Ivan, the subject of identification of different biological parameters is not only in the financial area. It can be used anywhere. And you remember we talked about medicine in the morning. There was state security, data protection. And how do you see this development? My question is what is correct for each market to develop separately, to make a national pool, to make one non-government pool, or to create certain transition buses? Well, look, bio-identification can be used in insurance, in medicine. It can be used in banking, because we as MFO can act faster. We have to take that risk, and we can better work with such clients. As for the technical or the implementation, I would split it into two parts. In my opinion, any business company, any commercial company is more efficient than state, simply because it must earn money. It's its main purpose. So if the state and the government provides a reasonable regulation, or if the central bank does that, I would think that the commercial companies or MFOs will provide the technical implementation. So it must be, technical implementation must be commercial, and it must be state monopoly. Because we talked about the numbers of Rostec using one, cost of one client to Rostec, that is 200 rubles, and that's too much money for us. And if there's a few competing organizations, first of all, that's improve security, and the audit will be easier, and the government will be able to control, not to execute. And I think this format would be the best. Yes, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left. May I ask one blitz question to you? And I would like all the Russian participants to speak first, and then the last word would be with Andrei from the standpoint of global trends. Also, I understand that a lot of you can talk about global trends with certainty. From your standpoint, which technology is the most promising in the nearest future? The technology that we did not talk about, what would you like to implement, or what is a very promising technology that you could potentially use in your business, not maybe tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow? It seems to me that the current technologies are under-implemented, underused. So the electronic document processing and robotization of this process can do a lot in the market, and can use that for many years. It's not that very expensive. That's being implemented everywhere, and I think that there's a good promise of development in this area. And I believe that's interesting, and evolution of all that, blockchain and more. So we've made a leap, and we must just understand what we've done. Well, I believe that there's much to be done with. Andrei, we're missing you so far. The next one. I believe that information is under-segregated. So if there's a technology that links all the financial and credit information about the person to one ID number, that will be of help, so that there's no there isn't 30 different borrowers with hundreds of bank accounts. So we need to aggregate that information, and that will allow to better assess solvency, and people will not have to pay separately for each service, because each service will be linked to that pool and will get rent payment, mortgage payment, health insurance, and everything. So there's too many small actions. We need to aggregate all that and connect banks to it, and insurance companies and healthcare institutions and so on. So one ID, yeah, and forming a pool of data around it. So ecosystem around one person must be interrelated. Yeah, okay, I understand, Ivan. Yes, in my opinion, two main trends existing nowadays. The first one is a practical application of big data. When big data is oriented not to an N, not to a group of users that work with context ads, for instance, but when it's oriented towards one single person, when we certainly know that the ad that we get will not make us mad. And secondly, it's blockchain, but it's not cryptocurrency, but blockchain as a technology, because distributed systems of calculations and records is a phenomenal thing that can really shake the world economy. So it's a transition to digital economy, but we'll come across a lot of problems on the side of the government and problems with technology. Continue, please. I believe that the trend that can be seen now, and what we call big data, is a small thing compared to what we will have in the future, because the main trend is IoT, the data, the exact data that will be so numerous compared to what we are having now. And we need to learn right now to use what we have to be ready for the future. Thank you, Sergey. Well, I'll be more practical. In my opinion, if we want to increase financial inclusion, so remote identification, like in India, is of use, and I believe the maximal effect of this technology. Andrei?
Завершайте.
So thank you. Yeah, basically all was said. I'm a big fan actually of AI, which means we need to have end-to-end all the data processed in the right way. But let me give you, so also to be able to be of value for the banks, for the insurance companies, for the IFAs who want to cooperate with us. But let me give you one example, because this is always driving me. Turning data into information is even in real life, is not an easy thing. I give you a pragmatic example. I'm married to a Croatian woman. Her mother-in-law always buys the same wine in Croatia. I told her 20 years ago, I don't like this wine, that's data, and I still have the same wine on the table every year. So yeah, but that's the use of data to turn it into an information. It's simple.
She loves you, I think, yes, right?
Yeah,
Your
look,
mother-in-law.
I guess she wants to send me a message, but apart from that, it's really like that. I think a lot of banks, a lot of insurance companies, those huge animals that were growing like 40 years through acquisitions. I mean, I worked for UniCredit before, so we were growing like hell. We had legacy systems. You have the data, but you just don't know what to do with it. So you really got to find someone who's putting the data into information to help you to scale your business up to the next level, which helps us automatically. So I'm a big fan, and just to say this, of cooperation, of understanding that we need to build a bridge to work together on serving the one who is in the middle, the customer, right? We need to understand to be lean, fast, and convenient for the customer, because the customer's feedback is the reason why we're closing branches also in the old retail networks. I was doing retail networks since 10 years, and I just closed branches and fired people. That's one of the reasons why I turned into fintech. So basically, the chance of AI, machine learning, putting this together with those who have the data is a huge growth opportunity and a big challenge for all of us. So thanks.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, esteemed colleagues. I believe that this system was successful. It seemed at some stage that we went up to the space, and then the colleague from the first row put us back and said that we're not ahead of the planet, and part of the financial market is really going in the same direction and does similar things. And he is absolutely right, because banks and brokers and MFOs in some time will become big IT companies and possibly will provide a wide range of services to the clients, customizing, and I like the idea of customizing the analysis of a huge mass of data for a certain person, not for a group. And again, those who are more adaptive and more flexible will be winners in this competitive struggle. I would like the audience to thank our speakers. I think they made everything possible. Well, good night and have a good day tomorrow.
Коллеги, микрофинансисты, не уходите, пожалуйста, мы сфотографироваться хотим.